It is Friday, July 28th. Let's talk PlayStation. Hello everyone, welcome back to another inexplicable episode of LTPS. We've got some PlayStation rumors, leaks, sales stuff, a controversy, all that fun stuff. So let's begin, as always, with our PS Plus reminder. This is your last call to grab the July PS Plus essential games before they go away. August 1st, it's going to change over to PGA Tour 2K23, PS4, PS5, Dreams on PS4, and also Death's Door on PS4 and PS5. Now, I am really surprised it actually took this long for Dreams to finally be on PlayStation Plus. I feel like that's one game that could have always benefited from being open to a wider audience, whether it's via subscription or doing a native PC release. But better late than never, especially because now it's actually also launching with Tren, the sort of arcade puzzler that Dreams is launching within Dreams. And that game's actually quite long, apparently. It takes a few hours to get through. If you want to do everything, it could take upwards of 10 hours. So that looks really cool. That's launching on August 1st as well. And also Dreams will be on PS Plus Extra and Premium. So if you're not a base essential subscriber for August, you can dive into Extra or Premium at any point, and you'll be able to access Dreams that way. Also, big recommend from me for Death's Door. That's a really fun weekend game, something where you can finish it in a few days. Great little isometric hack and slash, really fun title. I recommend trying that one out. Now, in other PlayStation Plus news, we have a brand new game launching day one into PS Plus Extra next month, and that is Sea of Stars, which is a kind of like a retro-inspired turn-based RPG. Looks really cool. It's coming out August 29th, so right near the end, but it's launching day one into PS Plus Extra and Xbox Game Pass, which is a very unique circumstance. I believe this is the first time we've ever seen this, because typically Sony and Microsoft, they both do this, but they will have, some sort of stipulation or requirement in the contract when they're signing on. You can only be on our service for, some kind of predetermined amount of time. And older stuff, that's not really the case, right? I mean, there's not really a reason to require that. So we see plenty of older titles live on both services, but at least when it comes to a new title, there's usually that requirement from both platform holders. But maybe the game was just in a really weird circumstance where it's not really a huge high in-demand title coming out, so maybe it just wasn't necessary this time, or perhaps one or both of these companies kind of they're now pulling back on that requirement. We don't really know, but either way, still interesting to see. So you can look forward to this game on PS Plus Extra next month. Now let's move on to our PlayStation leaks and rumors from this past week, starting with the Project Q remote play device that Sony is planning on launching later this year. Sure enough, on Twitter, from the account at Zubitech, we see some, not spy shots, but some photo and video of somebody that's messing around with what appears to be a prototype of the Project Q, and so we can get a better sense of, I guess, the size of it, how it very much does look like a DualSense cut in half with a tablet in the middle. We can see it's running a very stock version of Android, which is not really surprising. I mean, the thing does have to boot up and use something to at least initiate that remote play application that you're probably not even going to really notice or see, right? It's going to be a very modified looking sort of animation and startup screen to initiate remote play, because remember, this thing is not meant to communicate with Sony servers for PS Plus cloud streaming. This is meant for your own personal PS5 to stream your own personal games off that console. But having said that, we can see that if it is going to ship with Android, then maybe that does have some extra utility to this device where you can sideload some stuff on there and crack it open, right? I mean, but you got to figure the processor in this thing is going to be the bare minimum just to get the job done of remotely accessing your PS5. So, that's neither here nor there, but it was interesting to see some leaks. I'm sure we'll see more of this stuff, right, for either this device or the rumored PS5 detachable disk drive console. Now, as for the rumors, the big one this week was a new one for the PlayStation 5 Pro, which the story was back on Friday, so it's a little bit old now at this point, but at least we've been able to serenade on this because it's from Tom Henderson writing for keytogaming.com, and there was some initial confusion on the website and who's behind it and who wrote that story, but it is Tom Henderson, so I guess that's his second website that he wanted to use this report to launch the website, give it some extra traffic and get the domain off the ground, and so that's what's going on there. Normally this would be on Insider Gaming, where we've seen prior. Tom's had a very good source that's got to be very close to the PlayStation product roadmap, because so far we've been tipped off about the Project Q, the DualSense Edge, the InZone products, the PlayStation earbuds, and all these other things, right? So far we've had we found out a lot of stuff from Tom, and so that's why this new report about a PS5 Pro is one we're watching carefully. So in this new report, Tom cites anonymous sources claiming that the PS5 Pro is codenamed Trinity, so much like the codenames for PS4 Pro, which was Neo, or PSVR, which was Morpheus. They seem to really like their Matrix codenames. Apparently it's been in development since early 2022, with presentations and demos already ongoing. It's understood that most major studios will have dev kits by November 2023, and as for the expected performance targets, they're trying to aim for improved frame rates at 4K resolutions, accelerated ray tracing, and a new performance mode for 8K resolution. It's still allegedly targeting a November 2024 release. Now, Tom did also point out that he does have info on, I guess, more the technical aspects, but that's something he can't really speak on because he's not really into that stuff. But, you know, given the general outline of the expected performance targets, I mean, that all sort of adds up. I think it's not really a mystery as to what a PS5 Pro is going to do in theory. You know, we can look at what we have right now and at least get a good idea of like what this thing is probably going to do when it's playing some of the software that we're playing today, even unpatched, because that is the little caveat with a device like this, right, is that by the time they do a formal reveal and they launch it, you are going to have a lot of studios sort of natively support it, as in just make sure there's a PS5 Pro setting on that game, so that way it can take advantage of the new hardware. But in the case of the PS4 Pro playing regular PS4 games or a PS5 playing PS4 stuff, we can see improvements retroactively. It's more a matter of how that game was made on the outgoing hardware. So even, you know, right now we can play unpatched games that have unlocked frame rates and maybe high frame rate modes where it really dips around the 80-90 range. Something like, you know, games like those could benefit greatly being played on a PlayStation 5. But, you know, again, they're going to have a lineup of software that's going to showcase PS5 Pro. And that's where the one little angle of this is like, okay, ray tracing, yeah, it makes sense, right? There's not many games we've seen so far that use ray tracing in a really sort of mind-blowing way, or there's way too many compromises in the ray tracing mode in most cases for a lot of games. But it's the 8K thing, right? Like 8K is already on the box, which is just such a too soon, but let's do it because we can sort of technically get away with it and try and sell this thing as a future-proofed device. But there's very few 8K content you can watch, and you need the screen to begin with, which most people don't. Even a PS5 Pro, just way too soon. So it's kind of silly, but at the same time, it's Sony. They do sell televisions, so they do have a vested interest in, you know, pushing 8K adoption, right? But hopefully there's not really too much of that, considering there's just not really much we can even really see from that just yet. It's way too soon. But you know, PlayStation 5 Pro, if real, could certainly fit into that product category of a, you know, really beefy PlayStation console that's going to be the latest and greatest. You know, I was always a skeptic. I feel like we still could get away with this whole generation not having a mid-cycle machine. Apparently Microsoft, as of right now, does not have plans for one. But having said that, with this one source being Tom Henderson, it seems like it more than likely will happen. But the real sort of truth here will be when the dev kits hit studios, right? So if we do see these things show up at more studios, that's where we're going to see rumors pop up and more leaks from not just Tom Henderson to give the story a little bit more credibility. That's how these things normally go once, you know, new hardware is out there, so to speak. But we'll leave it there for now. PS5 Pro, that's the latest news on that rumor. Next up, we have what was a rumor, but as I film this right now, it's already becoming true, which is PS5 going on sale in more countries. So we saw before that the PS5 went on sale in places like Spain, France, Portugal, and now that deal seems to be extending to the US, UK, and Germany. The initial source for this one was Bill Kuhn over at Deal Labs, where they always post the PS Plus games. They leak them out before Sony officially announces them, and they had mentioned that this deal was going to extend
into these new countries. And so as of right now, the UK deal is live. So you can get a disc-based PS5 for £405 sterling, so 75 off, and that should be the same for Germany with 75 euro off, and then here in the US it should be $50 off for a disc PS5. Not too bad if you're in the market. And something where, as we've sort of safely theorized, they're probably just trying to liquidate stock of the current model, or rather trim down those numbers a bit so that near the tail end of the availability of this new console, there's a bit of a smooth transition, so that way folks don't get a little bit sidelined by going to a store, buying a PS5, and not realizing they potentially got the older one, right? So just trying to liquidate all the consoles they've made so far, because at least based on the rumors, they've already started manufacturing the new one with this detachable disk drive, which again, it's not going to be, at least from what we're hearing, is not going to be a proper exterior redesign. The internals certainly will be moved around a bit, considering we are expecting this thing to have a detachable disk drive, but it should principally look the same on the outside, although we've seen in prior years Sony will, with new model numbers, new model variations, they will make minor changes here and there, right? So changing out the capacitive buttons on base model PS4s, that initial console design, or taking out the glossy black plastic for a matte finish. Same with those fat model PS3s where they went from the shiny chrome to a flat silver for the trim on the console. But we might see something like that with these new PS5s, but they should still look generally large and fat, in case that's what you if you still like that part of PS5, which also implies the current console cover should still work. But between the sale and the Spider-Man PS5, which I'm sure is going to do quite well, they're probably just looking to move the current model number, which we should also point out, when the new model number does finally come out, there are going to be disassemblies of that thing, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that, considering we've had two model variations now where, something happens, right, and there's a bit of a storm or controversy or whatever else the case may be. So let's fully expect that may happen with this new one. Now, while we're talking about PS5 sales, good segue to our next story, which is Sony confirming PlayStation 5 has now sold 40 million consoles worldwide, which, for context on how the console is doing now when launch aligned with PS4, or rather, it hit 40 million about 2.5 months slower than PS4. So it is finally closing in on, being launch aligned with the rate of sale for PS4, and in all likelihood, it is going to reach it and exceed it by the end of this year. But Sony's still selling a lot of PlayStation 5s. They had mentioned on the SIE blog that there is now 2,500 PS5 games out there that are currently available. It probably does not feel like that, but that number is surely bloated by all the things on PSN that might be a dollar, a very small title. Things constantly come out on PSN. We're talking 15, 20 games at any given day. Usually there's a handful of titles that'll go live on PSN every week. But they also put out this really cool infographic that shows the top 40 PS5 games voted by the community. And you gotta love that Bugsnax is on there, Stray, Returnal. There are some fire banger, delicious, smoky, good games on there, and always cool to see stuff like that, right? A little bit of a community feedback on some of the cool games that have come out on PS5 so far. But the demand has still been very good, and I think we're going to see some crazy numbers by the time we have this holiday season completely wrapped up. Moving on to Insomniac Games, we've got a few news items for this very busy studio, and that kind of goes into this first story where they're working on a brand new AAA unannounced project. The way this popped up was from the Twitter account @Dreamwalker, where they had pulled this clip from a Full Sail University seminar, and the Insomniac project director Aaron Eberhard said that they're working on a brand new AAA unannounced project that they cannot talk about. The news here is that we already know about Spider-Man 2 and Wolverine, so what is this third game? Now, the thing is, we already knew Insomniac had an unannounced multiplayer project in the works that they were hiring for. Those were open job listings. It wasn't really a secret. We've talked about them plenty of times on LTPS, so presumably that's what this is. we can rule out Spider-Man 2 not having a multiplayer component, because that's the one little caveat with things like this, right? Based on job listings and how the recruiter has written these things, they don't want to give out too much info, but, it could be something as simple as they write a multiplayer project on the listing, but then you show up and you get brought on board and it's really you're working on a co-op component or some sort of extra multiplayer component to an existing game that they already put out or that they're already working on and announced, but they're not ready to talk about that portion of the game yet. So it doesn't necessarily always mean it's its own thing, and I'm not implying that is what's happening here, but just to say that that is a possibility. But I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of surprised that this news story got so much attention as is, because we already openly knew that they were working on a multiplayer game, so it seems like most places where this was posted, by the time you click into it, then somebody chimes in and says, or it's in the body of the story where it's like, oh, and they were hiring for multiplayer. So, not a big news story. It's just something where, like, okay, Insomniac is making more games. Big shocker. They've put out so many PS5 games so far, since they're a very talented studio. And not to say that putting more pressure on that studio, but yeah, it's still exciting to see them working on new stuff. So it'll probably be a while, though, until we see whatever this game is, right? We still have Spider-Man 2, after that Wolverine, and then who knows what they're going to be doing, but whenever they're ready to talk about it, I am ready to listen. Now, in other Insomniac game news, we have what appears to be a very inconsequential controversy going on, at least in my view, but Insomniac is no stranger to these kind of controversies. They had the puddle thing on PS4, the face swap of Peter and Spider-Man Remastered, and now it's MJ's face on Spider-Man 2, where that new trailer came out, and a lot of fans, they did point out that, hey, MJ's face does look different. There were hundreds of comments on the Spider-Man PS4 subreddit and a few other places talking about this. So one fan on Twitter had mentioned that, it seems like they definitely did change it. And then the Insomniac community director, James Stevenson, had to respond saying that no, it is the same face model. And that is the thing, right? I mean, it's a matter of there being a big time delta between when they did the original face scan and made the game back in 2000. They shipped it in 2017, but we're talking about even years prior to that where it was in development. So, a lot of things have changed since then. Probably the actress herself with her likeness that she's providing for the game, and then the facial scan technology. And they're also on a new platform where they can try to get closer to the likeness of the face model. So there's a lot of that at play, even though I can certainly understand how a lot of people watch that trailer and they go, okay, MJ looks different. She does. She definitely does look different. Not even so much a matter of like different lighting conditions or her haircut being different, which those can sort of exasperate the facial changes. But it is the same face model. And I don't know, it's one of those things where I think it's not really a huge deal, not going to bother people once the game's out. I don't know, we've had so many of these examples throughout the years. There's so many game franchises that have sequels and then the main character looks a little different, or they did this weird thing where, it's what they're wearing, or they gave them a tattoo or something and this and that, and usually it just doesn't really matter and it kind of blows over. There's only a few times where there's like some serious fan pushback where maybe it's warranted and it didn't really make sense for the character. Like, the one thing I always go back to is Chad Cole on Infamous 2. And I think the reasoning behind that was that, Sucker Punch had said that they thought people did not like the original character and how he looked and how he acted and things like that. And so that's why they tried to sort of reinvent Cole. And then it was kind of like fans were blindsided, like, what did you do to this guy? Like, just make Cole again. And then they did. So, but either way, I think it's just not really a big deal. Now, the far more interesting Insomniac news story, Insomniac and Nixxes Software, is the PC port for Ratchet Clank Rift Apart, because now it's out, and sure enough, it's Digital Foundry that did some initial testing to see what happens when you play that game on a very slow storage device. And surprisingly, even SATA SSD did not really do all that well. They were playing with a minimum spec, so running at 720p, comparable performance to a base PlayStation 4, and they did find that even on the initial Rift sequences, the SATA SSD was running into some hiccups and slowdowns. And also later in the Blizzard Prime level, there was a little bit of stalling there as well. Not nearly as bad, but something where you are going to encounter some slowdowns. Now, they did also test a stock PS4 5400 RPM HDD, and that was bad. The game came to a complete stop during the initial Rift sequence. Now, mind you, if you're patient, it is totally playable, but I'm sure most would agree that's not really the ideal way to play the game. I mean, really, if the game did ever ship to PS4, I guess we can safely say the sort of compromises that would have to be made just would not make sense at all. That, or you're making a Ratchet game with this world jumping mechanic, and you're sort of throwing out the novelty of that by throwing in load screens. Now, they did also find that when using NVMe, like very, very fast Gen 4 NVMe SSDs, the read speeds on those are sort of capped out at a certain point. So regardless of CPU and GPU overhead compared to PS5, even if you are using a really fast SSD, it's the PS5 version that still works through those Rift sequences just a little bit faster. So it's probably something where there is an arbitrary cap on the speeds on PC, so no matter how fast the SSD is, it's something where you're going to get the same, you're going to go through those sequences at the same speed every time, versus PS5 having the same speed every time, obviously, because it's a console. But and there may be a little bit of optimization going on there for PS5 as well, but either way, we can see that this game was probably very intense on what is extremely fast texture loading and asset swapping, right? Dumping all this old stuff for new stuff when and it's all based on like sight lines and things like that. And there's a bunch of other developer tricks that they use, not to try and get technical on it, because I certainly can't explain it the way Insomniac probably could. But it is one of those things where it seems like the game is pretty intense in that department. And so I'm surprised that SATA SSD actually did that bad. I thought SATA SSD would be okay, and it would be HDD that you would maybe see a hiccup or two, but HDD is like pretty bad, right? And that's something where, like, the game's already running at like 720p, although I think Rich said they could push it to 1080 and the frame rate was fine outside of when the rift sequences start. But it is interesting. They're going to do a deeper dive on that, but I'll link the video down below if you want to watch that stuff. It's always fascinating when Digital Foundry kind of dives into that stuff. Next up, let's talk about that Twisted Metal TV series on Peacock, because so far it seems like it's actually doing not that bad. Last time I checked on Rotten Tomatoes, it's sitting at a 64%, so it's like mixed to good. There are a lot of places that are saying they did genuinely enjoy it, that the dark humor does land really well in a lot of cases, and that there's a ton of references to the games, even though there's a very obvious deviation from the plot line. It seems like there's a consensus that there's like the ending doesn't really have a big payoff, although they do set up a roadmap for possibly doing a season 2, which is not guaranteed. I'm not sure if I'm really going to watch it. I would maybe, if I do, I'd maybe set aside a day where I've got like I'll sign up for a trial or something. I don't really want Peacock, but I don't know. I'll leave this more to the Twisted Metal fans that possibly got a really good TV show. It is really cool that like all these game properties, not just within PS Productions, but across the board, it seems like these things are finally being taken seriously with bringing on the right talent and, trying to really respect the source material. So whether it's, all the stuff PlayStation Productions has done so far, which a lot of it is landing, right? Like I think the worst thing probably would be the Uncharted movie. Most of that stuff has been really good so far. The early screenings for Gran Turismo were super positive. And then there's all this other stuff going on with like The Witcher, although season 3, I guess, is not that good. The Mario movie was very well received. I actually watched that last Saturday, so I got to it a little bit late. But I really enjoyed that film. It was so fun. And I did not go into it like wanting to hate it based on voice actors or anything, but I watched it and I'm like, okay, this is fun. This was a feel-good movie that respected the franchise and the characters and all that, right? So it's great that we're finally getting that stuff in TV and film. So I think it really bodes well for possibly God of War and Horizon. I'm still really skeptical about those properties, but fingers crossed, we'll see. Now, this one I just had to mention because something really, really cool has been happening lately from Danny O'Dwyer of NoClip, where he came into a bunch of, like a big archive of just a lot of unseen, or sometimes it is seen, but there's bad quality out there, of video game press stuff. It could be interviews, it could be press conferences, performances, just all kinds of games industry media that a lot of it is unseen, but also a lot of it, there's just no good, high quality uploads on the internet. And so he's been uploading this stuff on a separate NoClip YouTube channel, and he's working through some PlayStation 3 era stuff. And you can now see the 2006 E3 press conference in beautiful 1080p. Now, honestly, the upload that's already been out was not a bad quality, so it already looked okay, but it's just, if you want to see those old trailers and Ken Kutaragi up on stage, Kaz Hirai, Phil Harrison, and just that presentation is so infamous, and it's never looked this good. There's also a lot of other just weird, kooky stuff. Like, one thing I always knew about was a Ludacris performance in it was San Francisco, I think, for the PlayStation 3 launch, and now that's out there with Jack Tretton. a sweaty Jack Tretton, introducing Ludacris to a hungry, crazy crowd waiting for PlayStation 3. It's cool seeing all this stuff. So I encourage you to go check out that channel and subscribe to see all the cool stuff that's been getting uploaded lately. There's a lot more that he's working through. So that was one noteworthy thing in PlayStation history that is worth taking a look at. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter. And if you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it's very easy. You can follow the link down below. Supporting this channel, a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all, and our Tuesday video was looking at my top 10 most played PS4 games ranked by total hours. I don't think that's going to change, considering PS4 is pretty much done, so to speak, right? As in, I don't think those numbers are going to change for me personally, even though there's a lot of PS4 games coming out, but either way, I thought it was fun to share that, so go check it out, join that casual conversation, share your playtime as well. I'm still working through those comments. It's always fun to read, and that is pretty much it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.